here. And yes, thanks very much for that, Andrew. Do appreciate that. So we can see just here. Oh, what happened? Apologies. We can see just here. We have the RPM since 2020, or think of it as the previous NamesCon. It ramped up during COVID, and now it's slowly tapering off. But the thing I'd like you to look at is the normalized RPM, and this is the critical one that here at ParkLogic we look at all the time, is look what's happening at the end. It's kicking up, and that's a really important indicator, leading indicator. So if you're thinking of buying a portfolio, then now is the time to buy one if you've got one, because I think it's going to continue to kick up, particularly leading into Christmas. But let's take a look at this a little bit more. People love EPC and CTR, where earnings per click is a measure of the advertiser demand. Well, CTR is a measure of the user interactivity. Yeah, so we look at both of these, and what they do is a typical dance where one goes up, the other goes down, and you see, and that continues. So even though I said what EPC is and what CTR is, user intent and so forth like that, is it really? So I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to both these metrics, I must admit. And the reason why is because when you see something like this inverse relationship, it really smacks of someone trying, or some organization trying to manipulate the results, where one goes up, the other goes down. It's been doing this since 2002, by the way. So I actually think this is more to do with Google's Treasury Department, as an example, rather than the true user intent and so forth. But that's okay. That's the world we live in. So let's keep on moving. So volatility. What I'd like you to notice is the volatility back here in 2020 was quite a bit lower. I was hoping to get some lines on this chart. Compared to now, we're in a world where it's actually increased volatility, and where there's a lot more dynamics in pricing. So you probably see this maybe even in your own account, wherever you're monetizing your traffic, where it's one day it's high, the next day it's low. It's a bit of that. There's quite a bit of volatility happening in the world, which is not unexpected. We're still got COVID. And I just read there's a new strain of COVID coming through. By the way, if you're wondering what some of these big spikes are, I believe they're roughly the different strains of COVID as they came through. And I think this was the Ukraine one coming through as rumblings and everything like that. But yeah, so it's a really interesting thing to look at of what is actually happening with volatility and having this volatility index. Let's continue on. Normalized RPM from growth from base. What does this mean? If you had $1 of revenue you're earning for a domain back in 2020, then right now it should be earning 200% more. So it should be now earning $2 worth of revenue. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen my stock portfolio perform like that. So it's not too bad, but once again, you see it ramping up in the COVID, and there's a few really big spikes here. And then it's slowly been going down and kicking up at the end. So let's keep on going. Now, the thing I want to know is the difference between direct advertising networks and Google. What's been actually happening here? Where's all the money going? Blue is Google, and we can see it's been going on this particular journey and sliding down. Look at the volatility at the end there. It's really increasing. And you can see here, this is direct advertising networks. They really went down quite low here in the middle of the pandemic and so forth. But look at them surging back. And that's largely, if you ask me, off the base of particular travel and loans and finance and so forth like that. Those segments are absolutely booming. To give you an indication, I think every single flight, and I took 20 flights in my travels around the world, every single flight, every single seat was sold on the plane. It was staggering, absolutely staggering. And to get hotel rooms, it was, yes, you could get them, but gee, you paid a lot for them. to get a hotel room. And a lot of that is in amongst this, and you can see the volatility increasing. So where's the traffic going? That was the revenue. By the way, I should just come back to this. We've now crossed a really important line, that really the 30% line, which means 30% of the revenue is coming from direct advertising networks. So if you do not have your traffic exposed to direct advertising networks, you're losing big time. So where's the traffic going there? And you can see it's really low. It's actually about 8% of the traffic is going to direct advertising networks. They're very, very selective. And there's quite a break point right here. It was a way that we were doing some things internally, by the way. What it means is that 8% of the traffic is providing 30% of the revenue, and it's going up. So there's a really important couple of numbers there. One of the things that Google has, they have massive breadth, and that's why they have really high. They're able to sort of get Mum's Knitting Needles, and they've got some ads for Mum's Knitting Needles as a .com. But the direct advertisers don't have that sort of thing, but they've got depth in various market verticals. So let's take a look at this. This is the really good one. This is the normalized RPM for Google in blue and direct advertising networks in red. And take a look. Google is sliding off. Direct advertising networks are accelerating upwards. Now, Google's on the left axis, direct advertising networks on the right axis. Let's put them on the same axis. There's Google. That gives you the direct relationship between the two. So it's an important one there. I think we need to, Alec, you need to mute please. Yeah. So it's a very important distinction there. So if you have all of your domains with a single parking company or something like that, they typically are Google back. You're down here in the bottom. You need to go along and get exposure to those direct advertising networks. Okay, growth from base. That being said, Google really accelerated upwards, but they definitely has dropped off. Well, the direct advertising networks are once again continuing to move upwards. So what are the takeaways? Every domain investor needs exposure to direct advertising networks. You really do. We're climbing out of the summer and headed to Christmas, and you can feel that, which is great. And direct advertising networks make all the difference to performance. They're the three takeaways from these slides, and that's it for this month's monetization update. And I hope you find these are useful. And if you have any questions or anything like that, then please feel free to reach out to me or to Andrew, or there's actually Matt here as well from ParkLogic. We'd love to be able to go along, assist you, and answer any questions you may have. As I said to my daughter, we don't do sales, we listen to people to see if we can help them. Then that's our goal. Anyway, thank you for that. But now we're heading towards a really important part, and this is why we're all here, and that is to have a fireside chat, virtual one anyway, with a very good friend of mine, which I've known for, oh my goodness, a long time. But not only is he a great friend of mine, which I love catching up with at every sort of event that we're attending, he loves reading science fiction, and he's read my book, Battle Frame. So welcome to you, Stevan. It's great to have you here.
I'm just waiting when the next one in the series is coming out.
Oh man, I've been wanting to write that. It's been, I got this business called ParkLogic, keeps on distracting me.
All right, close it down and start writing. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, how true, how true, how true. But yeah, so people look at you and they see you at different conferences and so forth like that, and they go, here's a lawyer. But there's one thing I've learned about you in our many conversations. You're more than just a lawyer, aren't you? Like, so what's your background anyway, and how have you gotten to where you are now?
I started out as a computer geek, and
God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, in high school, we were the ones who were part of the Boy Scouts 2000 and stealing EPROMs out of the Apple computers and rewriting them and
Good stuff.
doing other strange things. And I actually started going down the path of doing computer science and started a master's of computer science at NYU, and then realized that even if I could get something to actually write and work, it wasn't efficient. And I never really liked this efficiency thing. So I switched paths and went to law school instead.
So where did you go to law school?
District Columbia School of Law here in DC.
In DC. So you're a DC boy.
I grew up around Manhattan. I grew up New Jersey, Manhattan, and was there for a long time, went to college, went to Bard, and then came here to DC in 1990 and stayed.
Yeah, fair enough. So back in the old days of computers, when you're there flashing the EPROMs and all that sort of stuff. By the way, if for those of you who don't know what an EPROM is, it's an erasable programmable read-only memory. How's that? How was that? I must admit, I remember back in those days. And you'd flash them with ultraviolet.
Yep. EPROM writers.
Yeah. Ultimately, it was ultraviolet. Then you write your program or your base code into them, things like that. Did you find understanding that some of the technology that you're working with, even those formative years, has put you in good stead as you move forward in your career?
Quite a bit. I mean, when I got out of law school, I went to work for a patent firm, and we were writing patents all day, every day. And so I was writing about computer patents, and it came in handy actually being able to talk to the inventors and understand what they were talking about, as well as understanding technology in general. That if you can't talk to people, understand what they're saying, there's no way you can communicate it on paper.
No, absolutely. I must admit, my background, I started cutting my first code when I was 11 years old. And I went through and I did a Bachelor of Science, Electronics, Computer Science, and did it in an MBA. So I always say to people, I love technology, my bachelor, show me the money, the MBA. And that's been actually quite a good combination. It sounds to me like you've had a similar one journey yourself. And just before you answer that sort of question or that statement, for those of you who may have some questions of Stevan or myself or whatever, then please feel free to put them in the chat. Down the bottom there's a little chat button. And if you put them there, I'll see if I can weave them into the conversation as we go. And it'd be great to get some level of interactivity here. So Stevan, so you went on through from working with Apple computers and so forth like that. Ultimately, you became a lawyer, but there's a few years in between. So what was that journey that you went on those years between? You obviously had that infatuation as such with technology still.
Oh, yeah, I still do. I mean, I still read all of the magazines to this very day. And I mean, I've slipped over into doing a lot of biochemistry these days, which is a lot of fun too. But I enjoy doing the patent work, but I also wanted to do more things. So my law partner that I met there after about a year of being there, we said, let's go start our own firm. Originally, there were 4 of us that were going to start. 2 of them dropped off. And he's been my partner since 1996. But we slowly started expanding out, and I had been playing with domain names to some degree for a number of years, even owned a few domain names when they were free. And then met a guy named Thonian Alganum, and he said, hey, why don't you represent me going to this conference, Traffic, that they're starting in 2001, which was the first Traffic conference. And yes,
yeah,
right. And started meeting some of these wonderful people who seemed to think outside the box and think a lot the same way as I did, and like to innovate and try wonderful things and make some money in the process, which was also a little bit of fun. And you know, I fell in love with the domain industry, because it's got all these really cool people, and domain names are interesting. I mean, at that point, there was no UDRP. there really weren't any laws, and so we got to actually make a whole bunch of the laws. And at this point, when we go in and do domain theft cases, a lot of the cases that we cite are cases that we actually started and did many years ago.
Hmm.
It's a fun way to be.
Absolutely. Like, I need to ask a question. When you cast your mind back to 2001, 2002, at the very first traffic conference in Delray Beach, I must admit, I missed that one. I sent someone else in my stead to go to attend that. So I missed the very first one, which is a bit disappointing. But anyway, but when you cast your mind back to that, what was the thing that gripped you about not just domain names, the community as such? What was the thing that sort of thought, gee, this is pretty interesting?
I mean, it's a little bit hard to say. I went representing Thunian and wore a suit the whole time, and I think I was the best dressed person there at the time. And
that's obviously changed now, is it?
That's definitely changed, no question about it. And things have sort of gone up and down from that point of view as the years have gone by. I guess I was grateful for him to sending it, and I met a bunch of people there that I actually liked. I liked a lot. That I found it interesting, and I think I gathered almost everyone's business card, which I still have, because I don't throw any business cards away, from that conference, and sent emails to most of them after the conference. And people started asking questions. And I met Ari Goldberger there,
yeah,
and John Berryhill,
yeah.
both of whom I'm still good friends with. And they had been sort of playing with this stuff for a few years at that point. And there was another attorney, Steve, I don't remember his last name any longer.
He was out of DC. That was Stevan. He was an older guy. He ended up retiring. Lovely guy.
Yeah, he was really nice, and he knew an awful lot. He'd done an awful lot of litigation over the years.
Yeah.
And he was one of the few people that was much older, that was substantially older, and getting into this new area that he really seemed to enjoy an awful lot. So chatted with him quite a bit.
Yeah, it was an amazing time back then, and it was quite heady, I must admit. There was obviously a lot of money sort of sloshing around as people were earning money from traffic domains and things like that. And when I reflect on my own journey back then, I remember my very first traffic conference. The thing that hit me was the entrepreneurial drive of the industry, and the fact that the people who were attending back then were really different. That you'd sit down with them for like a coffee or something like that, or a drink, and they would just come up with the most bizarre, amazing ideas, most of whom wouldn't work, but there was like just constantly bubbling up. Is that something that which really began to captivate you?
I mean, I like to think of our clients at the law firm as people who are square pegs trying to fit into round holes.
Yeah.
People who are a little bit different, people who are trying to innovate and do things that are really very different. And I don't mean just the domainers, whom I think are wonderful people and I really enjoy, but all of our clients. People come to us and they say, you know, I've got this great idea, I want to write a patent on it. Or I'm starting this new business, I'm going to make $1 million and I need these 12 trademarks instantaneously. Yeah. Or they come and they say, I've written this book, it's out of this world, can you help me file for a copyright? Or, I mean, so many different sorts of things. One guy who's in the domain industry, he's managed to get into buying and selling toll-free numbers. Oh, yeah. I remember another person, another person, actually an Australian, came to me and said, let's do a cross-reference between this industry of selling license plates in Australia and domain names.
Yeah, there's Dan, if you could just move, thank you. Yeah, yeah. There's that's one of the things that really attracted me to this industry is just that sense of an entrepreneurial drive, which I found was absolutely fascinating. Like I said, you talk to people and they come up with new and fresh ideas and all that sort of stuff, and they're sitting on these incredible assets. So I want to move a bit more into the sort of the legal side. Then I want to talk about beyond the legal side in a minute here. On the legal side, when you take a look at some of your extensive experience over the years, and you reflect on it, and you think, gee, some of those domains, they should never have been taken away from the owner. And then others were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm defending this case. And is there any stories amongst all of that?
Well, I mean, there's lots of stories. Unfortunately, most of them are confidential.
Of course, but they're not giving away specific information about a specific domain or anything like that. But is there any sort of lessons, I guess, that we can learn as the domaining community from some of your experience there?
I mean, a couple of different points I can give you. I've written a lot of UDRP responses over the years, and I primarily write responses, although I've written, a couple of handfuls of complaints. People could come to me oftentimes and they'll say, can you write this? And I'll write it. I'll write the response and they'll read it and they'll be like, wow, there's not a chance in hell after reading that we can lose. And actually this happened just recently. Guy asked me to write him a response. I wrote the response and I said, you really need a 3-person panel. And he said, oh, I'm a 3-person panel. That's extra $1,500. I really don't have it. And the brief, it looks beautiful. There's no way. I mean, what I'm sort of saying is, part of the point of writing is putting things in the best light for your client. And that's what you do with, I mean, you don't fudge the facts, you state the facts as they are, you state the law as it is, but you can present things in a better way when you're writing. And sometimes the clients buy into the bullshit, so to speak. And you should know that the writing and the brief is one piece, but the people that are reading it are experienced attorneys or experienced UDRP people. They're going to see through much of the bullshit if it's there. And even if they don't, that they do, they're still human beings. Judges are human beings, lawyers are human beings, arbitrators are human beings, and they come to it, whether they like it or not, with their own point of view on the universe. And if you only have a single arbitrator in a UDRP, you're coming into it with one hand tied behind your back because there's only a single point of view being presented. Other than, I mean, obviously the attorneys, both sides, their briefs are there, but the person who's making the decision, they get up in the morning, they put on their slippers, they go down, they have their coffee, and maybe their wife yells at them that day and they're pissed off. Who knows? If you have 3 people on the panel, then at the very least, then they can argue about it. And one person can say to one arbitrator can say to the other arbitrator, but what about this idea? Or what about that idea? It's far better to have more people making the decision than less. And it's why we have juries. I mean, although there are times, in cases where I've wished not to have a jury, but most of the time when we have, I've been very happy about it because, the wisdom of the masses, so to speak. So never go into a UDRP without getting a 3-person panel, and don't always buy into your lawyer's bullshit. How's that? Yeah.
So question: did they win or lose?
They lost.
They lost.
I told them they would lose. I thought I wrote a good brief, and yeah. I think they would have had a chance if we'd had a 3-person panel, but they chose to have a single and they lost. And then they came to me and they said, well, how much is it going to cost to file a federal court action? And I said, well, the other side has unlimited money, so we'll need $100,000 retainer.
Yeah.
And he's like, but that's a lot more than $1,500.
Yeah.
I said, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And absolutely. I must admit, my recommendation to people is always there's two groups you have to be 100% transparent with. And if you can't be, then find someone else, and that is your accountant and your lawyer.
Yeah.
Give me 100% transparent and take their advice. You're paying them for their professional advice. So take their advice. If they say you need a 3-person panel, get the 3-person panel. And that's my view anyway, is otherwise don't bother paying them. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then move on. Yeah, get someone else you do feel comfortable with. And that's, I think it's immensely important. But anyway, so looking at an example like that, were there cases where you're ever put in a position where you had to defend something, you look at it and you're going, this is indefensible? Has there ever been a situation like that?
I can't say indefensible. I've had some
maybe not
bad
indefensible. That's a bit too much, but
well, because look, I can't represent something in the court that's complete bullshit. You got to tell the court the truth.
Yeah.
As long as if you got an argument, then sure, you can put forward the best argument. That's the goal of being an attorney, is you're advocating for your client. I have definitely had cases where the facts were not on our side, where I've said to the client, you don't stand much chance of winning here. And there's different reasons why people can not stand much of a chance, because the facts aren't great. That's one possibility. And the facts could be not great from a legal point of view, or they could be not great from the point of view of how the world's going to look at it. Or from the point of view of the other side just has unlimited money. I mean, I went into one case years and years ago, and actually I can think of 2 different cases for opposite sides of the coin. I went into one case where the other side had unlimited money, and I knew my client couldn't spend more than $100,000. So we had to bluff and try to get the other side to settle before we actually got to the end of his line. Which we were successful at doing. And I was in another case where my client was the one that had the unlimited money. And, you know, he definitely had the worst facts, but he basically said to them, here's the settlement offer that you're going to give to them. And tell them that if they're not going to accept that settlement offer, that I'm going to buy their company and fire every single employee. And I just don't care about the money, even if we're going to lose a few $1 million. And you know, we won both cases, but we won them from very different points of view. Yes, there's a great advantage when your client has more money than God. But it's not really a legal argument. It's the power of money, as opposed to when you only have a little bit of money, you then have to be a little bit more clever and find other ways around it.
Yeah, which brings up a point around the different processes. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's 2 processes that people can go through and respond to. One was the UDRP, and the other one is the URS. Is that right?
Sure, but URS isn't used nearly as much, and
that's more an automated solution, correct?
It's not automated, but it doesn't have the advantages. You don't get the domain name. The domain name gets frozen and then dropped. I've actually never done a URS because nobody's ever wanted me to do a URS. Everyone says do a UDRP because we don't want to have to do this again in a year. You know.
So let's imagine one of the domain investors here has built a website themselves, and they find that someone is purchased a typo of their domain. Could they then come to you and say, I want to file a UDRP versus you defending a UDRP process?
Sure. That gets into the question of trademarks.
Yeah.
You get all rights in a trademark from your actual use of that mark in interstate or interlatic commerce. So if you're just using it as a domain name, you've built a website, blah, blah, blah.com, and you're not using blah, blah, blah anywhere on the website or in association with any goods and services, then you don't have a trademark. You only have a domain name, and you don't have any basis for filing a UDRP. If on the other hand, you have on the website a blah, blah, blah.com, and I don't know, let's say you're selling chairs, and on that website, blah, blah, blah chairs. And it says here at blah, 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 we sell the best chairs available, and then someone else comes out and they get blah, 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 blah. You know, now you have common law rights to that trademark because they've got a particular mark. It's associated with goods and services, chairs, goods in that case. And they've got a website up there, and they're trying to advertise it and do sales to third parties, people who are uninterested in their business. And on that basis, therefore, they can then go ahead and file a UDRP. Not as easy a filing as if you have a registered trademark. Obviously, in order to get a registered trademark, you need the exact same thing. You need basically either common law use or to be able to file an intent to use trademark. But if it's an intent to use trademark, at least in the United States, you then still have to show use before you get the full registration. But yeah, I mean, just many people have common law rights. I like to say in a lot of my UDRPs, you know, my client is using the mark specifically in association with advertising for others. I don't know if any of you guys remember Warren Weitzman.
Of course.
But you know, we did a case for Warren, got to be at least 15 years ago, and we got a ruling out of a judge that specifically said that his use of domain names on parking pages was advertising for others and use in commerce, and that therefore all his, you know, 10,000, 20,000 domain names at the time were actually had common law usage because he had them for a period of time. And that's the point of view, that if you're using the domain name, and UDRPs actually move forward from that point, that they've now recognized that someone who's an investor in domain names has legal rights. You know, whether on the East Coast or West Coast, which still hasn't really decided between them whether a domain name is actually a fungible good or a piece or a contract / intellectual property. Either way, you still have rights as a domainer and as an investor to those domain names because there's value to the domain industry. And that's been recognized over and over and over again. To just recently, there was a there was a case that specifically said that, you know, if you have a domain name and it's got, you know, 3 or 4 letters in it, that it's or is a generic of some sort, that it's valuable enough that it's understandable for an investor to buy it just for the purpose of resale, which is great.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario, a lot of this stuff, isn't it? And one of the things that I must admit I encountered numbers of years ago was, what is a domain name? Is it a stock item, with which case you're trading them? Is it an asset? Is a contract right? Like, to be defined as an asset, you have to be able to control it, but then you don't really control it because someone else can take it off you. So, and so do you really control it? Or is it more like an insurance contract where it's going to expire at the end of 12 months? So what is a domain name? Has there been any illegal definitions, particularly from a taxation perspective, that you're aware of in the US of what a domain name is?
Well, there's 3 different points of view, as I was sort of hinting at.
Yeah.
So the IRS basically considers it intellectual property. Because they can tax it better that way.
So can I ask a question about that then? if I have it independently valued at $100,000, a domain name, and then I go along and mistakenly drop that valuable asset, do I then have a capital loss of minus $100,000?
No, and that wouldn't be true with any intellectual property. At least not in the US, because your loss is the amount of money you put into it. You only get the value. You can put any value you want on it until you sell it. That value isn't changed. If you buy it for 20 bucks.
Let me push you on that though. Let me push you on that.
Okay.
How about the goodwill and things like that? So,
well,
so
goodwill is only goodwill's only associated with trademarks. It's not associated with the domain name.
Well, hang on.
Two different things.
But if I have google.com, the domain name, and I actually drop it, how much have I just lost? Have I just lost $10?
Well, it depends. One, you asked the question. I mean, did you buy it for $10? One.
Well, of course, they probably bought it for $10.
Okay, so you bought it for $10.
Yeah.
No one valued it. Google.com, on the other hand, we know is a trademark.
No, forget trademark. Let's imagine there's no trademarks on it.
If there's no trademarks and no common law rights, therefore no goodwill, then there's no goodwill. Goodwill is only associated with trademarks. So period.
You can't associate goodwill with a domain name itself.
No.
Okay, so what we're saying then is this. Let's imagine I get a domain independently valued at $100,000. And yes, it is. Can I put that into my books that I now have $100,000 asset?
Well, I'm not a CPA, but I believe you bought it for $10. Yeah. Who cares what it was actually valued at? Because, I mean, let's ask the same question. You buy a car for $10.
Yeah.
Or $100.
Yeah.
And someone comes along and values it. Sorry.
Because it's a rare
tell somebody to go away.
Yeah, let's imagine it's a rare Mustang and you happen to have bought it from inside someone's barn. It's been underneath the covers in a barn and you bought it for $100.
Right.
It's actually worth $100,000.
I mean, if you can sell it for $100,000, then certainly it's worth $100,000.
Okay, but does that mean does that mean I get a capital gain then?
Yeah, you got a capital gain. You put $100 in.
But
you sold it for $100.
Why can't I get a capital loss then?
Because I don't think that's the way the IRS works.
No, I'm sorry, I'm pushing you around at the moment.
Yeah, no, I don't think it works that way. Though.
But it's an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because one of the things I've noticed, particularly a lot of the new domainers have come into the community, is what they do is they buy 1,000 domains. It's like joining the lottery, right? Like, how do you become an instant millionaire? Easy. You buy 1,000 domains, value each one at $1,000. Now they're worth $1 million.
Yeah, but that's only on the books, and and if you lose those domain names, you can't take the loss because you didn't actually move any money. You only lost the 1,000 domain names at the value. Let's say it was $10 each. So maybe that's $10,000, but you're not going to go any further than that.
Yeah, there's some interesting things around the legalities. One of the things we discovered in our pursuit, we sat down one of Australia's very top law firms, lawyers, one of the partners of the firm, and we were going through domain names of what they actually are. Are they a contract right? Are they an asset? How do we count them? Are they a P&L item? Are they a balance sheet item? All this sort of stuff. And in the end, he said, oh my gosh, pay me like $50,000 and I'll go away and do a research project and see if I can get a ruling on this. And I was like, yeah, I think
the problem is not everyone agrees. I mean, you go to the West Coast of the United States, it's definitely an asset. It's fungible. You could sell it. You can make a claim for a bona fide purchaser for value. Not that helps a lot in California, because even if you buy a stolen domain name in California, you still have to pay the owner for the true value of the domain name. Yeah. But it's still a fungible good. Whereas on the East Coast, not so much. It's a subject of a contract. Correct. And I don't believe BFP is going to work on the East Coast.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things around this, even worse, I think, in the US, where you have different jurisdictions viewing it different ways and things like that. And then you get into the taxation implications. For instance, in Australia, it was, are you deemed as being a trader of domains? You're buying and selling. That means it goes straight to the P&L, and you don't get some of the capital gains tax provisions of holding an asset for a period of time. And so it gets even more complicated.
You add in multiple countries, every single country has different points of view. And then it gets very, very hard in order to be able to, figure out what's going on and figure out the tax implications as you move domain names from country to country to country around the world. I think it's a lot of fun looking at the treaties and looking at what the rules are in each single country. But as far as I know, no one's ever really done a real survey of all the countries and all the different areas in the countries as to what a domain name is and how to do a cross comparison from a tax point of view. It would be a fascinating thing to write if anybody wants to write it. I think it would be a lot of work, though.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I just want to bring up another interesting things. For those of you who are buying and selling portfolios of domains, one of the interesting things you can do is you can actually justify, if I pay $10,000 to buy 1,000 domains, then I could do average cost pricing and say value each one of them at $10 or something like that. But if I pay $100,000 for 1,000 domains, I can value each one for $100. If I then drop a whole lot of those domains, I get a capital loss, which will offset some of my tax losses and my tax gains. You can do some actually quite interesting things. So because there's a justification for the methodology. Yeah. So, but anyway, we could go along with it on the CPA route, but what I'd like to do is go down a bit more on the legal side. You've had extensive experience on the legal side. I think you've given some great advice around UDRPs. Would you recommend, though, if someone's owning a high value domain, that they get a trademark also on that domain?
Not really, because remember, domain names aren't trademarks. Trademarks must be associated with particular goods and services.
Yeah.
So just let's pick out a high value domain name. Someone here used to have bird.com. Let's use bird.com.
Who would have that been?
I just imagine. Clearly the best name to let you fly.
Yes.
And bird.com on its own is just a domain name.
Yeah.
It is when you take that bird.com and you associate it, say, with an airline, and you put up on your website that you're going to provide services of an airline and that people can log in, and instead of it's American Airlines, it's bird.com, and people can get on Bird and fly wherever they want. They have to sit on the back of the bird, of course. It's a little bit windy. But that's an association with goods and services and then you can get a trademark in association with Bird, not bird.com, although I guess you could get it with bird.com, but that would be sort of silly because the .com in most cases will be considered a generic and a non-functioning part of the trademark. Because you always got to remember, trademarks, domain names, not the same thing.
Correct.
They're highly associated with the same word, but they're not the same thing whatsoever.
Yeah, so let me push you around with this. One of the things we've seen is we'll use bird.com as an example. Obviously, the high value domain is that, let's imagine it's parked.
Okay.
And so a lawyer goes along and says, I work for Bird, I don't know, selling birds, a company called birdshop.com or something like that. You're sitting on my trademark, on my domain. I've got the trademark and all that sort of stuff for selling birds. And I've now gone to bird.com. I've done a screen capture and see, I can prove it now that there's birdshop.com is in that list. You're trying to cyber squat on my, on me. Now, here's the issue. Is the lawyer works for birdshop.com. They've been psychographically targeted by Google.
Yeah, of course.
So Google, of course, is going to serve on bird.com, bird shop ads.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not context driven, it's psychographically driven. Google made
Well, look, we all know exactly how that works.
Yeah.
Basically, they're placing their own advertisements on bird.com.
Well, no, they're not doing that. They're not doing this. It's more specific than that. Is that Google has realized a lawyer is interested in bird shop. Therefore, it's now targeting the lawyer with bird shop ads. We've all seen, you've gone to your finance website, gone to a finance domain, and you see ads about Bali holidays. Why? Because you're looking at Bali holidays yesterday, and they're trying to do retargeting.
Got it.
Yeah.
Look, the reality is, yes, that's the interest.
But is that going to affect UDRP though? Do the UDRP people
it should not
realize that that's a psychographic targeting and it is not valid evidence?
I don't think they understand fully psychographic. I don't even know how to spell that word. Let me Google it. How do you spell it?
SYCHOGRAPHIC. Psychographic. Targeting the individual versus context on the page. I remember just where you looked that up. I remember years ago, I had a guy complaining that there was porn ads on one of his domains. And I had to say to him very politely, well, then stop looking at porn. Because he was being targeted.
Valid point. Yeah.
Valid point.
Look, the reality is, first of all, bird.com is a generic word, and it's part of the English language. No person can have an exclusive rights to the word bird, period.
Yeah, I agree with that, but that was a sort of case study. I guess
just because it's being targeted doesn't mean that's going to give that person or that UDRP any greater chances, especially if you point out that there's psychographic targeting.
Yeah, so basically it will not influence, in your opinion, it will not influence the UDRP process. The fact that we get this all the time on behalf of our clients, because we're monetization experts. The lawyer will say, see, you're targeting our client, whatever, and all that sort of stuff on this page. And I have to politely respond back to the lawyer, no, you've been psychographically targeted by Google, and this has no standing.
Absolutely. And sometimes the lawyer will be smart enough to get it, and sometimes he or she won't.
Well, then so the question is, did the UDRP panel understand?
The UDRP panelists, most of them get it, especially on, dictionary words.
Yeah, well, that's actually a really important point for all the people in this room right now, is that a lot of people have said, well, I don't know, it's risky going along and say parking a domain or something like that, because potentially it's going to more likely I'm going to lose this domain or something. I'm not talking about singleword.com. So I probably would not park those. I would have them in a separate category because they're worth like potentially millions. But I'm talking about the vast majority of domains. People get very nervous about domain parking. So what you're suggesting is, and I'm suggesting, I mean, everyone needs to get their own legal advice and their own case.
Sure.
Stuff. So we'll put the caveat around that. That is actually it's unlikely to influence the UDRP decision.
It certainly should not. Although, let me give you a harder example, and just reminder, I've got a 6 o'clock appointment, so I'm only here for a few minutes more.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say the word bird in Spanish or Italian or some. Let's say it was in another language.
Well, I'll give you.
Pájaro.
Say that again.
Pájaro is bird in Spanish.
Pájaro. So, all right. So there it is. Someone has pájaro. I can't even say it. .com. And that's, it's the same word. It's a dictionary word. But what if somebody turns around and they say, all right, we're going to use pájaro for an airline company once again. And they get lots of use in lots of different countries. Do you think that would give any more rights to the company and to influence the UDRP panel?
That's an interesting question, isn't it?
The answer is it should not, but the reality is people who are to speak other languages, the reality is one language is no greater than any other language. You know, people who there's I don't know how many, you know, billions of people speak Spanish, but you know, it's an equal language to, and every other language is equal to every other. And just because the panelist doesn't know it doesn't change the rights per se, and it's the attorney's obligation to educate the panelist.
Yeah, absolutely. Just I know you've got to get going, and we thank you for your time and all that sort of stuff, Stevan, but I think you need to mention, just on your as you're preparing to leave, two things. You don't just do law, do you? You do escrow.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah, we do lots of other
and you
things.
do investments as well, don't you? You have an investment fund and everything as well.
Small investment that's slowly growing. We're doing a lot with crypto as well. We have escrow domains that does. We're growing pretty quickly. We have a small registrar that's slowly growing. And we have a crypto exchange that's coming out on the market over the next few months. So yeah, there's lots of fun stuff that's coming, and we hope to roll things out and have fun with a lot of this stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's fun to do law, but it's fun to invest in lots and lots of other things and not be bored.
No, absolutely. Can I say, Stevan, thank you very much for your time. I know you've got to get to another meeting urgently. It's been wonderful talking with you and picking your brains and challenging each other and that sort of stuff. It's really been great having you here, and we'll have to get you back on another time. In the meantime, if you're needing some escrow services or anything like that, or legal advice, please go and have a chat to Stevan. He's a real expert, and he's got the runs on the board to prove it. So thank you for Stevan. But just before I leave, you can go into your meeting now, Stevan. Right. Just before I leave, we run these fireside chats every single month, and many of you have been on these, each one of them, every single month at 5 p.m. Eastern time on the second Tuesday of each month. And I must admit, it's a real highlight of my month, and I look forward to like talking to different people and everything like that. But I would love to get your feedback on whether you found these times valuable, and also any other special guests that you particularly would like to hear from, or topics and things like that. I'm not saying we can possibly do it all the time or anything like that, but it'd be great to be able to hear from you. And so it's the 5 p.m. Eastern time every single month, second Tuesday in each month. And if you have any questions about monetization or some of the stats I put up earlier, then I'll hang around here for a few minutes, or maybe we can have a chat for the next 10 minutes or so, and hopefully I can answer some of those questions. But in the meantime, it's been great having you here, and I look forward to seeing you next month, sorry. And don't forget, feel free to invite other people. I think we have a great community, but it's a community of like-minded individuals who just love doing domains and being entrepreneurial. So a question was just asked of me, are replays made available? Yes, we're recording this, therefore we'll go and make that available, and I'll put it up. I think it's
YouTube link.
Yeah, I'll provide a YouTube link. Yes. If you go to michaelgilmour.com, it'll be up there. We're actually redoing the ParkLogic website at the moment, and we'll put it put them all up there as well. So we look forward to that. So great question, Carlo. Thank you very much for that.
Michael, there's a few people online where we don't really know their contact details. I've sent them direct messages, but if you do want a copy of it, a copy of the recording and Michael's PowerPoint presentation,
yep.
Can you please email meamiles@parklogic.com. So A for Andrew, amiles, one word, @parklogic.com, and I'll send you a copy of the link for the YouTube, and also a copy of Michael's presentation.
Yeah, so it's in, I'll just put your email address to everyone in this chat. There it is there, amiles@parklogic.com. And Sven, it's great to have you here too. And so if any of you need any assistance also with monetizing your domain traffic, we'd love to help out. And the most important thing is we'd love to hear from you. and just see if we can help. And if we can't help, then we'll go along and we'll say, hey, we think someone else maybe will better help you or something like that. But we want to hear from you. As I said in NamesCon in my keynote, it's not about us. You're the hero of your journey. We may be able to provide some tools to assist you on your way. So we look forward to that. Anyway, fantastic. Thanks a lot for that, everyone. If there's any other questions that we have, then
Carlo's got a question, I think, for you.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Good chat. Thank you.
And Carlo, it's been wonderful and meeting you once again. It's been a long
You
time.
too, my
since,
friend. You too. All the best. Thank you.
Okay, and Sven, it'd be great to catch up sometime. I'm sure that Matt or Andrew would love to reach out to you as well and see if we can get further things happening. But anyway, God bless everyone. See you next month.